Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Shelly and I got a new cord, so hopefully this video I won't be out of focus the entire time. This is day 8 of my 13-day countdown to Halloween that I do every year. I call it Shelloween. Today we are going to be doing another true crime video and we will be talking about the Axeman of New Orleans. Now this is a very popular case and many people think that this case wasn't real, like it didn't happen, but it did happen. Indeed it did. And I know that on American Horror Story, one of the seasons they talked about the Axeman. So if you watch American Horror Story, then you will remember him. That dude, he wasn't just a character, he was actually a real person. The problem with this is that it is completely unsolved. No one has any idea who it is. Well, we have a couple of ideas, but we'll get into that in a second. First, I just want to mention really quick that if you haven't entered my giveaway, it is my Halloween giveaway that I do every year. The winner will be announced on Halloween, and to enter, you have to be following me on Instagram, be subscribed to my YouTube channel, take a screenshot that you are subscribed, and DM it to me on Instagram, and then that's your entry. After that, you can have an extra entry, not an extra entry. You can have several extra entries. Over on Instagram, I'm doing a 31 days of makeup for Halloween, and if you share any of those to your stories and then tag me in it, then that's an extra entry. So you could potentially have 31 extra entries. You don't have to share that look like the same day that I do it. You can share the look any day until the end of the giveaway, which is on Halloween. Today we will be doing a more simple look instead of my usual crazy Halloween ones that I've done so far. So if you are wanting to do a more simple look this year, then maybe you can follow along, but just letting you know, it won't be a tutorial because we will be talking about the Axeman. As always, if you are curious about any of the products that I use, it is all linked down below in the description box. And this series is completely based off of Bailey Sarian's series, and all credit goes to her. She is queen. So yeah, keep on watching if you want to learn about the Axeman. So the span of the Axeman cases are from May of 1918 all the way to October of 1919. So it was about like a year and a half of killing, and he didn't do them like right next to each other either. This case is completely unsolved. No one knows exactly who killed all of these people. Before I completely get into it, I do want to let you know that this is an older case, like early 1900s, and before that, whenever we do a case from that time, the details and all of the facts are just like a little bit questionable unless they come like directly from the police or something. Back then, journalists or newspapers, they wanted to tell the story, but they wanted their story to be like the most interesting version, so they would tweak it or make it a little bit more interesting to sell the story more. So some facts might just be people stretching the truth a little bit, or it could actually be true. So just know that like there's some things that are a little bit iffy. There's a lot of speculations. There were people that like wanted to be involved, because sometimes whenever there's like a super popular case, someone just wants to be included, or they want to get like attention from it. That like sounds mean, but it's true. So they'll witness something and be like, oh, it was the Axeman, to like get a bunch of attention or something. Just warning you. So let's start May 23rd of 1918. Imagine we're in New Orleans. There's a man named Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine Maggio, and these are Italian immigrants. They came to America, lived in a little apartment above a grocery store, and they owned this grocery store. See, that's like such a cute little thing. You know, like in shows or movies, whenever there's like a couple that owns their own grocery store and then they live right there. I always think that that's really cute. Well, one night a man chiseled his way into their back door and got himself into the house. So I'm assuming that the door was like solid wood or something, because in all of these stories it says that he chiseled into them. So he would chisel into the door and then squeeze through a little hole that he made, and he would leave the chisel right there. Whenever this man would get into their house, he would go and find if they had an axe. And so he went and he found Joseph and Catherine's axe, and then he went and found them lying in their bed. They were both asleep, and he slit their throats. And Catherine, whenever he slit her throat, he went so deep that her head was almost severed. He slit their throat with a razor. He just like hit them with the axe a couple of times to finish them off in some sort of way. I don't know. So Joseph had two brothers. Their names were Jake and Andrew. And Jake and Andrew lived next door. One of them had like woken up in the middle of the night, and they said that they heard groaning or moaning, or like it sounded like someone was in pain. So they went next door to check on their brother, and they actually found Joseph still alive, but barely. He couldn't talk and he couldn't scream or anything, which is why they heard like gurgling groan noises. And he didn't make it, unfortunately, but it is nice that he had, both of his brothers there for him to pass away with them there. And unfortunately, whenever they got there, Catherine was already dead. And this was 2 hours after the attack, so Joseph had laid there for a while already. They called the ambulance, as one would, but Joseph did not make it long enough for the ambulance to arrive and help him. When the police got there, they found a pile of blood-soaked clothes. It was as if the Axeman got his clothes all bloody and then he undressed and just left the pile right there for them to find. Since this is 1918, they did not really have DNA testing, so they would not have been able to test it. Police looked around the house. Jake and Andrew, the brothers, said that nothing looked out of place and nothing looked like it had been gone through. Nothing looked like it had been stolen. So it was literally like this guy just came in their back door and killed them in the middle of the night. Of course, the policemen, the first people that they look to are the brothers, because they live next door. How come they didn't hear someone breaking in? Like, how come they just didn't hear their brother get attacked next door, yet they heard him groaning at like 4 a.m. It's a little sus. They had found the axe left outside of the home, and they found a razor that the Axeman had used to slit their throats. Now here's what's interesting, is Andrew owned a barbershop, which was only a couple streets away. At a barbershop, you're gonna have razors, especially back then. Like whenever men would go to the barbershop, they would use like straight razors on their face. And that's exactly what was used to cut their throats. So of course, Andrew immediately looks suspicious. Now the police are like digging around in the brothers' lives and stuff, and since Andrew looks particularly suspicious, they ask his employees about him. They just need to see what kind of guy he is. And one of the employees said that he distinctly remembered Andrew taking a razor home, saying he wanted to sharpen it, and it was the exact type of razor that the Axeman used. So whenever the police asked Andrew, how come you guys heard groaning at 4:30 a.m. but you didn't hear like the attack, because the attack is going to be a lot louder than the groaning? And the brothers had said that Andrew had recently gotten in the Navy, so they had been up celebrating and they got drunk. So whenever they went to bed that night, they said that they were like too drunk to hear anything and they were completely passed out until 4:30 a.m. when they had sobered up. Maybe one of them got up to get a drink or something, some water, I don't know. So this is kind of weird and random, but the police found a note that seemed to be written in blood, and they found this note just a couple blocks away from where everything went down. And the note said, "Mrs. Maggio will sit up late tonight, just like Mrs. Tony." Obviously that made absolutely no sense to police, so a lot of people think that this is just like something that a random person did just to like mess with police, because this was like a big case that everyone was kind of interested in finding out who it was. So it could have been the Axeman messing with them, but it also could have been just some random person messing with them. Who knows? About a month later, on June 27th of 1918, a man named Louis Bessemer and his mistress Harriet Ann Lowe were chilling in Louis's home above his bakery that he owned. Are you sensing a theme here? I'm sensing a theme here. And he was also Italian. So he owned a bakery and lived above it. He had a delivery man who would show up in the morning to drop off fresh ingredients for him to use at his bakery. But when this delivery man got there, Louis wasn't coming to answer the front door. So he decided to go around back to see if he was in the back doing something. Maybe he didn't hear him knock. I mean, he didn't really know what was up. He just decided to check the back. Whenever he approaches the back door, surprise, surprise, there's a chisel just laying there on the ground. So, you know, getting closer, he saw where part of the door was like completely chiseled out and it looked like someone had gotten in. So he kind of like breaks his way into the door because, I mean, it looks like someone broke in. So he's wanting to check on Louis because they know each other pretty well. He had been delivering stuff there for a really long time. So, I mean, it wasn't like he was just a stranger delivery man. They were on an acquaintance basis, if you will. So whenever he opened the door to check in on things, everything in the house was covered in blood. So he went up through the bakery and he went up to like the apartment or the house, whatever it's called, and the whole place was just covered in blood. So he went into the bedroom, and whenever he walked in, both Louis and Harriet were laying in the bed soaked in blood. Like there were puddles. There was a lot of blood everywhere, and they were both barely breathing. They had been hit in the head with the axe, or should I say Louis's axe, and they were able to be taken to a hospital, and they were both able to be taken care of. Whenever police looked at their house, nothing had been gone through, nothing had been stolen again, and they found the axe in the bathroom covered in blood. So I'm thinking the Axeman this time, instead of leaving behind a bunch of blood-soaked clothes, I feel like he went into the bathroom and like cleaned up a little bit and left the axe in there or something maybe. Both Louis and Harriet are at the hospital now, and Harriet was in surgery. Like she had to go straight into surgery, but the police were able to talk to Louis a little bit. He described a dark, looming figure, but he said that he didn't really get a good look because, I mean, he had been asleep. He was woken up by a blow to the head. So, I mean, you're not going to be able to see much. So guess what the police do? The police go and arrest a 41-year-old black man who worked at the bakery that Louis owned. And that was the only reason that the police had for arresting him. They didn't really have the description of this man, and they didn't really have any reason to believe that this man would want to kill his boss. Like, there were no arguments, like there was no tension between them. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. The police were just racist, you know, and I mean, back then it was like, if a white person did something, honestly, they could just blame a person of color and police would believe them. Like, let's be real. But I mean, the police kept him for a while and they tried to find evidence against him, but surprisingly, they found nothing. Like, obviously they're not gonna find anything, you know. So Harriet was in like a really, really bad situation. Like, she had had surgery and she ended up living for 7 weeks after the attack, but the whole time she had been going in and out of consciousness. She told the police that it was a mixed man, and then a little bit later she changed her story and said that it was Lewis that attacked her and then attacked himself. They asked her why would Lewis do that, and she said because she confronted him about being a German spy. I don't know, she just, like, her last few weeks, she was just really iffy up in her sweet little noggin. Police actually went and checked this out because, I mean, they had to, because this victim is sitting there telling them this, and so they have to check out any theory. And whenever they searched the house, they did end up finding a couple of letters that were in like a different European language. And because they found these letters, they actually ended up arresting Lewis, and they kept him for a while, but they literally had no like real evidence against him, so they had to let him go. And the officers that did that were actually demoted. Lewis didn't do anything. Like, he was just attacked, and then he has to sit in jail for 9 months until finally he was acquitted. I'd be pretty mad at those officers if I was in his situation. So August 15th of 1918, a 28-year-old woman named Anna Schneider was 8 months pregnant, and she was married to a man named Ed Schneider. And one day, Anna is home, very pregnant. Ed gets home from work. He'd had a long day. His wife was there, but she was in bed, completely covered in blood. And there was so much blood and so many wounds that Ed could not find out where the blood was coming from. Like, there was just so much, he couldn't tell like where to put pressure or anything. So of course he called the ambulance, and they were able to help her and they were able to save her. She had been, there's no good way to say this, but her scalp had been cut open. Ugh, I hate that. I hate the scalp, like the whole her scalp had been cut open and she had a few missing teeth. So whoever attacked her like beat her. And I mean, let's just take a moment to appreciate this woman, because only 2 days later she gave birth to a very healthy baby girl. So she completely survived, her baby completely survived. So I'm really glad that she ended up surviving. Whenever the police went over to check out their house, they didn't find an axe anywhere. And usually the axeman would break into someone's house and use their own axe. It was almost like he broke into the house and didn't find an axe. So the police think that he used a bedside lamp. And Anna got absolutely no view of him. She had been laying in bed again. The police suspected a man named James Gibson, but then they let him go shortly after. And the only reason that the police arrested him, it wasn't like they found evidence and then they were like, oh, it was this guy. While the police were investigating, he was like walking by, saw the police and turned around and ran. And that's like the most suspicious thing that you can do, is just start running when you see police. So don't do that, because it got him arrested And the reason why he was running was just because he had been in and out of jail and he didn't want to get arrested again. And he said that it was a habit to just run from the police. So August 10th of 1918, Pauline and Mary Bruner heard noises coming from their uncle's room in the middle of the night. Their uncle's name was Joseph Romana, and when the girls ran into his room, he was slumped over, sitting on the floor, covered in blood. The girls described a dark-skinned man. They said that he was a little heavier of a guy and that he wore a dark suit and a slouched hat. Now, obviously, I mean, this could just be young girls thinking they saw a dark man in a suit because, I mean, you know, they're little girls, they're kids, and they have imagination. So, I mean, you know, we don't know. They did find an axe in the back garden, and they saw where part of the door had been chiseled out. And Joseph was 80 years old, and he fought really hard for his life in the hospital, but after a couple of days, he did eventually pass away. So at this point, police are like, okay, whoever this guy is has killed a lot of people. We need to find him. So they had patrol cars everywhere. They were constantly keeping an eye out everywhere, like way more than usual. And they put it in the newspaper. They told everyone about it. They made sure everyone knew about it, and they made sure that everyone knew that this guy used an axe. And, you know, if you had an axe, maybe not have an axe anymore. But I mean, people did what people do, and they would call in saying that they saw a guy walking around town with an axe, and then the police would show up and no one would be there. And it just got to be this big ordeal. And it was actually 9 months of this before anything happened. I feel like the AXEMAN could have been waiting 9 months for like everything to die down, because I mean, everyone was on high alert for a long time. So I don't know, it wouldn't have been a bad idea to just stop for a while, you know, or just stop completely. I don't know, I'm just throwing out some wild suggestions here. So it had been 9 months, and on March 10th of 1919, there was a family named Carter Miglia, and they had like a family neighbor, and his neighbor one day heard screams coming from his house. So like any good neighbor, State Farm is there, and they went to check. I mean, it wasn't State Farm, I'm just kidding. The neighbor went to see what was wrong, and the mother in the house, her name was Rose, she stumbled into the hallway carrying her deceased 2-year-old named Mary. The 2-year-old had been struck once in the neck and sadly died in her mother's arms, and her mother Rose had been struck once in the head, and her husband Charles was collapsed on the floor with similar injuries as Rose, and they both survived, but sadly they did lose their little girl. Rose told the police that it had been the neighbor that attacked them, which makes me really mad. Like, Rose, I know you just lost your baby girl, but don't just start blaming the stuff on the neighbor that's just coming to check on you. Like, I just feel like it's not a neighborly thing to do. And the neighbor was a very, very ill 69-year-old man. I mean, 69 isn't super old, but he was like very ill. He was very weak, and the police immediately were like, no, like just no. So whenever the police told her no, she started accusing his son, Frank, who was 18 years old. And Frank was like 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. Like, I mean, this was a big dude. He definitely could have. So the police were kind of just like, I mean, we'll look into it. It's more likely he did it than the dad did, but doubtful, but we'll look into it, you know? And whenever the police went to the back door, because the Axeman would always chisel out a portion of the back door and slip in that way, but they tried to see if Frank could fit through the hole, and he could not fit through the back door. So then the police were like, okay, there's no way it was him then. And whenever the police asked Charles, even Charles said that it wasn't the neighbors. He was like, I don't know what Rose is talking about. As the system fails a lot of people, the system failed the old man, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And also Frank was sentenced, but he was sentenced to death by hanging. So Charles knew that the neighbors didn't attack them or hurt them at all. So he ended up divorcing Rose. Why? I mean, why? I don't understand what she was trying to do. She just didn't like them. Maybe she was a Karen? I don't know. But after Charles divorced her, she actually went to the police and she told them that all of her accusations against the neighbors were completely false and that they needed to let them go. You cannot redeem yourself after that, honey. Like, I know your daughter died and it's horrible, but you can't just do that to people, you know? Not an excuse. So just 3 days after the Carter Miglias were attacked, the local newspaper received a letter from the Axeman, and the Axeman put the return address for the letter as hell. I'm sorry, but is that not like, a lot of us went through an emo phase, right? And is that not something that like a kid going through an emo phase would totally do? I mean, I feel like a lot of us that went through that phase definitely, if we wrote a letter, we would put the return address as hell because we were emotional, you know? This is what the letter said. Esteemed mortal of New Orleans, the Axeman. That's how he referred to himself, I guess. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe. They smeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. And then he talked about how the police were stupid and how they're never gonna catch him and that kind of thing. Back to the letter. Now to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. See the Holy Spirit? I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions. Nether regions? Isn't that another name for down there? Like, nether regions. Surely he doesn't mean that. That every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then so much better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. The Axeman. I'm gonna cry. So if you don't jazz it out, the Axeman is coming for you. So, I mean, that letter just completely went old people viral, meaning that it was like on every newspaper. There were posters all over town about it, like old-timey viral. Now, most people believe that the letter was fake and it wasn't actually from the Axeman. It was just someone messing with everyone, just seeing what they could do. If it was the Axeman, it probably would have been like a power thing, just kind of seeing how scared he had the whole town. Like, if you have all of New Orleans scared of you, I mean, you would feel pretty powerful, but I really don't think that he was killing people for that reason. I honestly think that it was someone that just sent in that letter and it was just like a thing to see, to mess with people. Personally, I think it was someone that had a jazz band, because every single jazz band in New Orleans was booked. Like, pretty much every single house had a jazz band or some sort of jazz record playing. So I think it was someone that had a jazz band and they were just trying to get booked, and that was a way that they found to do it. March 19th of 1919, there wasn't an attack. And that's another reason why I don't think it was the Axeman, because I mean, he's not gonna attack someone on that night and encourage the people, I don't know, that are trying to be him. But a little bit after that, August 10th of 1919, a man named Steve Barker was in bed, you know, after a long day at work, finally able to go to bed. And then he opens his eyes when he's laying there. You know that feeling that you get when like someone's watching you? I feel like he had that feeling, because whenever he opened his eyes, the Axeman was standing right over him. So he saw a dark figure above him, and everyone is saying dark figure, but I really feel like, because it's the middle of the night, you are not going to be able to see who it is. It's going to look like a dark figure. Like, you're going to just be able to see the outline of a person. And police are automatically like, oh, a black man. It's annoying. Racists are annoying. So as soon as Steve Barker opened his eyes, he was knocked unconscious. When he woke up, he was able to make it across the street to his neighbor's house, and like as soon as he got there, he just collapsed. The neighbor called an ambulance and called the police, and whenever the police were able to talk to Steve, he could not remember anything, and he didn't even remember that he was attacked. His skull had been cracked completely open and you could see his brain. So, I mean, I'd understand if he needed a minute before answering some questions, you know. And when police investigated his house, nothing was stolen, nothing was gone through. Part of his back door was chiseled out. Later in September, about a month after Steve was attacked, there was a 19-year-old woman named Sarah Lawman, and she had been attacked in her sleep by someone who climbed through her window, and she had been knocked unconscious, and the neighbors heard a bunch of commotion, and so they went to check on her, and whenever they found her, they thought that she had been murdered. Her wounds were very similar to Anna from earlier. She was bludgeoned and she had been missing teeth. She said that she didn't see anything, and the police did find an axe outside the front of her house. The police really thought that it was a copycat killer, because in every single case he had chiseled out a piece of the back door and gotten in that way. So why all of a sudden would he use the window? Unless it wasn't him. Then about a month after that, a woman named Esther Pepitone had fallen asleep on her couch, and she awoke to a lot of different noises coming from her and her husband's bedroom. So she walked in there because she knew she had fallen asleep on the couch and her husband was probably in bed. So, you know, she went to check on him, be like, what are you doing? You're making a lot of noise. Whenever she got in there, she saw two men jumping out the window. Her husband, Mike, had been struck in the head 18 times. And Esther called the police and an ambulance, but he was dead before either of them got there. Whenever police got there, Esther was like completely calm. Like, she wasn't in shock. She wasn't freaking out because her husband just died. Like, she was acting like none of that had just happened. Was not acting like a wife who just saw her husband with 18 blows to the head, you know? So immediately the police thought that was a bit suspicious, because so far there had been no signs of it being more than one person, and then all of a sudden Esther says that she sees two men running away. So there were multiple wounds, we know this, there were 18. But they weren't all from an axe. They actually looked like they were from, like, you know, the big circus tents, how they have like that stake that they put in the ground to hold the tent down. There was a circus in town, so the police thought that it looked like that's what the weapon was. So the police weren't totally convinced that this was the Axeman's work. At this point, the police are coming more and more desperate to figure out who it was, and they started trying to find a motive, because it wasn't like it was a bunch of robberies. It wasn't someone trying to like financially gain from it. It wasn't someone, it seemed like someone just killing random people. So whenever the police were looking for a motive, they discovered that every single family or person that the Axeman attacked had been an Italian person. Whether it was an Italian immigrant or whether it was an Italian American person, and it was always someone of the Italian heritage that owned a business. So he was after all of the Italian entrepreneurs, it really seemed like. Then the police realized that it was probably racially motivated, which sucks butts. If you are super racist, you're disgusting. And if you're offended by me calling racist disgusting, then like, really, why? Don't be racist. Racist people are gross. But it really seemed like whoever the Axeman was could have been jealous, because during this time people were immigrating over to America still, and then they were able to start businesses, and if these businesses were successful, all of these white people who think that they're better than everyone else and think that they deserve to be more successful than everyone else, they were mad at all of the people who were from different places, or like I mean, the whole thing is just like completely disgusting. They would get jealous that these people had booming businesses because they just saw themselves as so superior for whatever reason. And I don't know how else to say it. It's just really gross. So that is one probability that the Axeman was just a racist piece of, I don't even know. So those are all of the cases that are like 100% credited to the Axeman, but there are a couple of different speculations as to who those copycats might be. Now, remember Esther Pepitone, who was sleeping on the couch? She woke up. We just talked about it. I'm sure you remember. But her husband, Mike Pepitone, well, apparently Mike's father had killed someone, and a lot of people think that his father had been involved in the mafia, and that whoever he killed in the mafia or something to do with mafia, because a lot of people think that the mafia came after Mike, and that's why there were two people, and that's why he was hit 18 different times instead of just a few times like the other people had been. What makes this particular one more interesting is that a year after Mike's death, Esther moved to LA, and she ended up marrying a man named Angelo. And on the 2-year anniversary of Mike's death, her first husband, Angelo went missing. A little bit after Angelo went missing, a man showed up on her front door and he demanded that she give him $500 and all of her jewelry. So she was super smart and she was like, okay, I'll be right back. I'll get you jewelry and I'll get you the money. So the man is being a good guest and waiting by the front door. But whenever Esther comes out of the room, she has a revolver and she shoots the man. And she killed him. And she did go to prison for this. And whenever she was being questioned and the police asked her, why did you just kill him like that? And her response was, that was the man that killed my husband. So this man's name was Joseph Mumphrey, and the police actually looked into it because, I mean, the police knew that her husband had been killed by the Axeman. So they looked into Joseph Mumphrey and they found that he had a very long track record and he had been in and out of jail several times. And every time that he got out of jail, it lined up perfectly with the Axeman murders. I mean, he was already dead, so they couldn't like question him about it. But that's another suspect that a lot of people think might be the Axeman. And he went to prison in 1912 and he was there until he was released in 1918, and in 1918 is whenever the Axeman murders begin. And before he went to jail, there were 6 different cases of Italian business owners being killed. So he is definitely a likely candidate. And there was a kid named Jake Bird who was convicted of murder with an axe, and whenever he was arrested, or it was a double murder, by the way, but whenever he was arrested, he told the police that he was guilty of 44 different murders with an axe. And he said that he had been all across the US and he had murdered 44 different people. And whenever the police looked into it, he was a teenager during the time of all of the Axeman murders in New Orleans. So it's very likely that he could have been the Axeman, because remember when Frank, the 6', 200-pound guy, he was blamed for murder, but he couldn't fit through the chiseled out part of the door? I mean, if Jake Bird was a teenager back then, it's very likely that he could have been able to fit through that door. And he was sentenced to death, and whenever he was in court and he heard his sentence, he stood up and he told everyone in the court that they would all die before he did, and half of them actually did. So a lot of people think that he's a pretty freaky guy. So it's like we have a lot of people who are very likely to be Axeman, but we just don't know. And a lot of people also think that H.H. Holmes might be the Axeman, and they also think that Jack the Ripper could be the Axeman. It's a lot of speculations, trying to make it look like there's bloody tears. That is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed this little story about the Axeman, and if you have any speculations as to who you think it might be, a lot of people, because in his letter it said, you New Orleanians, a lot of people think that it might be someone who isn't from New Orleans or isn't from the area. And do you think that it was racially motivated? I definitely think that it was racially motivated, because everyone that was dying was like Italian families who were pretty successful. And so yeah, I definitely think that it was racially motivated for whatever reason. Ugh, there's just like no reason for it. It's so violent for no reason. The whole Jake Bird thing is really creepy, how he just told the whole courtroom, you're all gonna die before I do, when he had gotten the death sentence, and it was like half of them did die before he did. So I think that's like really creepy. Anyways, out of all of the suspects, who do you think it is? I mean, until things are solved, we don't really know. That is all that I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed this look. Mostly glam, but it's a little bit of creepy and I'm living for it. I might do this on Halloween because I have no idea what I'm gonna do on Halloween. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you learned a little bit about the AXEMAN, and I hope that you have learned not to keep an axe in your home. And if you do have an axe, keep it under lock and key. Funny story, we have an axe and my husband was chopping at a tree. Oh, this is gonna be really gruesome. This is gonna be really gruesome, so you might want to skip ahead a little bit. But he was chopping a tree and the axe went down and went right in between his big toe and the toe next to it. Yeah, only had to have 3 stitches though. But I mean, he's all bright. Axes, man, I mean, just axes are dangerous. I hope that you are having an amazing spooky season and an amazing day. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up because I like it when you like it, and also hit the button down below, subscribe, become a part of our tribe. We are a group of people who like to look really pretty and talk about things that can get really ugly. So if you like that kind of thing, then definitely stick around. You have found your home. Don't forget to follow me on all of my social medias. It is just Shellie G MUA on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you want to see my makeup looks without having to hear me talk for a long time, then I completely understand. You should definitely go to Instagram or TikTok for that. Stay spooky. I will see you guys tomorrow. God bless. Love you. Bye.